Good morning, everyone. While our panelists are getting settled, I'll take a couple of minutes and say it is so nice to be home. I live in DC, I'm a Texan. So El Paso, Texas, born and raised. And I like to tell the story. I'm usually asked, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I talk about the fact that my grandparents immigrated together. They didn't have an elementary school education. But through my mom, after working 2 jobs, she discovered her local El Paso Community College. And the rest is history, because never did they imagine their granddaughter, my mother's children, would end up working at the White House, much less leading a national campaign like College Promise. So it is such an honor to be here with you today. And I'm so proud of the work Texas is doing. I say that sitting in DC, oftentimes in a world that does not agree on much of anything, but what you're doing is really moving the needle. And you're moving it for the country, so I have to acknowledge Mike Flores, who sits on our leadership council at a national level, and Joe May, who has been a founder National Advisory Board member. So thank you for all your leadership in bringing Texas to the country. So we talk about College Promise, but in a little bit about, we started with 80 programs. This is our 10-year anniversary. So for those of you talking about Promise, 10 years ago, we started with about 80 programs across the country. We're now at 450, 30 states with stateside Promise. So Eric and I will be working together to celebrate Texas's role in this as the year comes about. But part of Promise is really evolved over the last couple of years. And I think this is where Todd and Natalie are really going to help us really understand the role of Promise in building that talent pipeline for the country. So it is my pleasure to introduce Todd Williams, Chairman and CEO of the Commit Partnership. I don't know that you need an introduction. The work that you've done on behalf of Texas and the work that you continue to do to provide dignity, both education and employment, I think is well known. So thank you very much for joining us today. Natalie Williams, thank you so much. Your leadership with Tarrant to and through partnership. Plus we met in the elevator, so I feel like we know each other really, really well. So thank you so much, and I think the work that you're doing around credentialing and mobility, I'm really looking forward to talking about this a little bit. I'd like to start by giving each of you a couple of minutes to talk about your vision for your organization, what you're doing today, right? Especially as it pertains to economic mobility. I'm going to start with Natalie.
Sure. Wow, T3 has evolved a little bit. Can you all hear me okay? How about now?
Yeah.
All right. T3 has evolved a little bit over the past few years. We're still a very young organization. We'll be starting year 5 in July. And I think when we look at how we can best support students towards pathways to family-sustaining wage jobs, we learned very early on that there are so many layers to being able to achieve that successfully, and it starts a little bit younger than we had thought. So in terms of our approach, it's looking at it from a 4-pillar design that starts with parent and family engagement, quite honestly, and getting students to dream and believe about the power of the futures and seeing all of the opportunities that are available. Certainly eliminating barriers, financial barriers, knowledge and communication barriers, but also turning ourselves outward to the broader community. We do have a model and a platform that spans more than a decade, but we don't do our work in isolation. So when we think about T3 and our work, it is our model, it is our design, but it's a much broader impact network of support that we stand up to help continue to support students on their journey to get a credential degree and finding their best fit pathway to either college and then on to a family sustaining wage job.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Is there a common name? Williams is a great name. Don't you agree? Anyway, in all seriousness, Commit's been around for about 13 years. We are about a 60-person backbone organization that is focused, 70% focused on Dallas County work and about 30% of our work focused on our statewide work. I think the key levers that we really try and focus on are really one, data. Data is the voice of our kids. Data allows us to make better decisions because if you have better decisions, you have better outcomes. And I think we've really focused on making sure that we have real-time systems that can allow us. That's why the work of EMS has been so incredibly important to this work, so that we can make those real-time decisions. I think the second is to set a big aspirational goal for what our kids are capable of. I think that we waste a huge amount of human capital talent because collectively as a system, we need to own the outcome for each and every child. They're our children. I always say I come to meetings like this at the regional chamber, and I say, look outside these windows, and I'll ask them, how many of you in this room who are all the board members of the chamber, I say, raise your hand if you were educated in Dallas County and you didn't go to Highland Park. And it's not a lot of people. And I love being able to import great talent into this region given our job growth, but we have to be very intentional about letting our own kids participate in that prosperity. And I think the other thing is what we've been trying to spend our time doing is to try and make sure that our school districts really understand their role as the chief economic mobility institution of their community. And so we've been blessed to get data that really allows us now to tell each and every district, for your young alumni, 25 to 30 years of age, here's the educational attainment that they have, and here at each level of educational attainment post-high school graduation, here's what they're making in salary. And so we've quantified, for example, like a district in Dallas, if every kid just got an associate degree each and every year, you'd have $3.5 to $4 billion of lifetime earnings just for your graduates each and every year. So how do you frame that for them? Because historically, when you've been incentivized to be a high school graduation machine in terms of what the state provides you ratings on, we're really trying to drive home that message constantly and give out that kind of recognition for what they're doing. And then a final thing I'll say is I'm really, really focused on incentives. I was blessed to meet with Dr. Williams in Midland and Odessa when I sat on the commission for HB8. And one of the things that he said to me that really struck with me, which is incentive-based funding can really help me drive change at my institution. And we've seen the same thing within the K through 12 institution. When we highlight for our institutions, you could be making $145 million a year in K-12 through outcomes funding, and today you're making $11 million. That's a huge amount of accelerant jet fuel to support continuous improvement. And our goal lately is how do we use philanthropic capital to bridge those capacity building investments and then have it sustained by this financial funding. And just between HB8 and HB3 alone in Dallas County, it's $280 million per year of potential funding that can drive growth in this region. And so we're really trying to make sure every single leader knows that, our foundational community understands that. This can absolutely be done. And especially when you have people around room like this, rooms like this, that believe truly in the power of us working together collectively.
Well, thank you. I'd like to press a little bit more as we talk about mobility. These conversations we're having today are happening across the country. I'm sitting with governors on a regular basis and their team as they're thinking through their economic outlook, their pipeline of talent, the fact that you have states that are losing employers left and right because they're just not able to meet these needs. But at the end of the day, the definition of what does mobility mean for our students, right? And how are we preserving both the dignity of work, but also the dignity of a living wage? And how are we ensuring that those outcomes are happening? Have you all done some thinking around that, both for your individual organizations around salaries, really competitively what you're striving to achieve and how you're defining that for your students?
You want me to take the lead on them? All right, so. I'd like to approach it from a couple of perspectives. So yes, we know what the data shows about family sustaining wage and livable wage, and we've actually removed the word livable wage because that doesn't sound very appealing to students. So it truly is a family sustaining wage. What is a wage that you're going to need to support your lifestyle? How many of you have taken the Texas reality check? So we start with students taking the Texas reality check. I had an opportunity to connect with some P-Tech students, and they were in a very great program, engineering. And I asked many of them, I said, well, how much do you think you can earn once you graduate? They couldn't tell me. And I asked them, well, how much do you think you're gonna need to create the lifestyle of your dreams? They couldn't tell me. So we spent our first step, let's take the Texas reality check. And so at that moment they said, wow, it's gonna take $75,000. Some said $80,000 a year, $100,000 a year. And I said, okay, why don't you just search up what is the starting salary of an engineer with an associate's degree, engineering associate's degree. And it was that first moment that they said, you mean I could earn $75,000 if I complete this program? And I said, yes, in 4 years, you're a freshman, and you will complete this program. So one of the things that we have learned is that the biggest gap is the knowledge and information gap. How can you get students to be excited about what it is in their future if they, one, don't know how to even define or describe how they want to live and what it's going to take to support their lifestyle? And there was one student, and I always call out this student, they asked me, is how do you figure out how you want to live? So what we have been doing, and it's the power of partnerships and looking at economic mobility, first letting students understand what that means for you and how you go about unpacking that information. In partnership with JP Morgan Chase, we've launched a platform that will allow students to begin to explore just that. So they're beginning to connect, their educational experience and what they're doing and the decisions they're making as 8th graders and freshmen that lead to these opportunities, and helping to walk them through that and get parents excited. And so what's happening when parents are excited, they're like, well, I want a career as well. I want to upskill. So we're looking at it as a family approach, a student-centered approach, but really opening up the power of choice. And so we didn't realize when we embarked on this work that we had to start with a different problem. And the first problem was getting students to understand the power of those opportunities and being able to see their future. I hope that helped get to the question.
I would just add that I absolutely agree with students have to be the agent of change here. They have to be empowered to understand where they want to go, and they have to be supported. We've been doing some inventory of all of our school districts and saying, how much are you spending in advising? And we've seen some districts spending $180 per high school student and some districts spending 3 times as much. And guess what? When you look at and compare that versus a number of their kids that are enrolling in college, what happens? You get what you spend, or you don't get what you choose not to spend. And so part of this analysis that we've been working on, and that's why we're creating, similar to what T3 is, we want to create a centralized college and career advising entity for Dallas County. We've approached and are recapitalizing an entity called Education is Freedom. We're going to be investing several $1 million in that entity to basically help them start with 25% of the students in the county and really start from 9th grade to 12th grade and just really push interventions a lot earlier than what they've currently been, because you can't really change much if you're not starting to talk to a student until the beginning of their senior year. Every year when our students fill out a path form at the beginning of their senior year and say, we ask them, are you going to go to college, are you going to go to work, etc. 1 in 7 of our kids say, I do not know. In some of our high school campuses, it's 1 in 4. That's inexcusable. We have to make sure that we're talking to kids, and so that every year, every kid graduates with a plan and they understand what that plan is, informed by such things as the Texas Reality Check. I just think that's a fundamental thing that we have to do.
Todd, pulling the string on this seems like a big bet, right, for you all. This is one of the big bets you're doubling down on. Are there other big bets that you have in your portfolio that you'd like to discuss with the group?
I think, the other big bet I think we're going to be focusing on is how do we work very collaboratively with Dallas College, which was led by Dr. May and is now led by Dr. Lonan, to really double down on the investments that we're making in the Dallas County Promise. We've got to bring a gun to a gunfight. We can't bring a knife anymore. And so I think collectively we're going to be investing meaningful dollars. And now that we've got HB 8 dollars to incentivize and reward deeper investment by Dallas College, I think we're going to be trying to figure out how do we bring the resources that we truly need in workforce, in higher ed continuous improvement, in K-12 continuous improvement, in the recruitment function, and frankly, also in the reconnection and upskilling of disconnected youth.
Building off of your gun reference, show up to the right gunfight with the right weapon. So I spent 20 years in national security, so you're speaking my language here. My ism in national security is you go to war with the army you've got, right? You go to war with the army you've got. However, you really want to make sure you position, you don't get ahead of your supply chain, your people, the people delivering these services.
Come work in Dallas.
I think College Promise might worry a little bit, but I'm absolutely a good partner. The team here, I think, has done an incredible job rallying and creating that infrastructure. But at the end of the day, you got to build the infrastructure to deliver on the big bets, right? I think both of you are in a position where to whom much is given, much is expected, and your people are the ones that are providing that. What steps are you taking to build that quality infrastructure? Are there things that you're being thoughtful about right now? Because I will share that when I see these initiatives at state and local levels kind of not reach their full impact or potential, it's not because the vision's lacking or even the resources, it's usually their delivery mechanism ends up becoming compromised, right? So are you taking steps, or are there any observations you'd share with the group here?
Well, I guess I would just say, and I'll turn it over to Natalie, I think, one, having a big aspirational vision about what you want to accomplish. Ours is to basically double living wage attainment to 50% by the year 2040. Secondly, you have to be really transparent about progress, keeping people at the table. Are we making steps, progress every year, just like you would on the private equity side if you were in the private sector? Three, you've got to convince philanthropy to invest at the scale that is needed. JP Morgan Chase, for example, has been a huge supporter of our work. They are doubling down in what we want to do, but they also need to see a pathway to lesser philanthropy, that we're really going to replace their philanthropy over time by the public funding that's been made available by HB3 and HB8, so that they can see some financial sustainability to the pathway. That gets them excited. And I think they see the same way with investing in our work in Gates and Balmer and the Blue Meridian Partners that's also investing in San Antonio, which is a great partner of ours. That's what you have to do to make this work. You've got to build the infrastructure that the problem requires.
I would say in looking at our big bets, we're betting on families, we're betting on students, but we're also betting on industry. We have the data, we have strong partnerships with economic mobility systems. We're watching to see what students and families need and looking at the trends and how do we need to lean in and adjust and adapt our model. But at the end of the day, the responsibility doesn't fully fall on districts to provide the funding. It doesn't fully fall on colleges to provide the funding. When we look at who has the greatest benefit from creating this strong workforce pipeline, it's our corporate partners. And so when we're sitting down and talking with corporate partners like American Airlines and Lockheed and BNSF and several others that are leaning in, we want them to be champions for these career clusters and these opportunities. Who's going to stand up and say, we're with you parents, we're with you students, there is a pathway for you and the job for you is right here with us. And so I think when you look at how you truly are able to change and create that infrastructure, T3's young. I mean, we are, going into our 5-year, startup is great and sexy and everybody loves a startup. But then when you get to growth and then on into maturity, it gets real. And so when you begin looking at it from a infrastructure standpoint, how do you have the optimal staff? How do you ensure that you have the right people and the right structure in order to scale? Then the other piece you look at it, where are all the multiple funding sources that will ensure that sustainability, and who are the individuals that are benefiting? So it's our partners with industry, it's our 8 institutions of higher education partners, it's certainly our district partners, but when we look at the model, T3 sits in the center of a much broader ecosystem. And what we believe is that if we arm individuals with the data, with the information that they need, and they can see that clear vision for students to viable job opportunities to corporate partners, they can see the pipeline. For example, we met with Omni yesterday, and Omni said, we want to know the 8th graders and where they are right now in terms of making that decision, and really your sophomores. So what are the number of sophomores that are really interested in these jobs? And we're like, well, we can tell you. We have data sharing agreements with 12 districts around the greater city of Fort Worth, and we can tell you that pipeline. And they said, that's what we want, that's what we need, and that's what we're willing to invest in. And it's part of that platform that helps us do that, and looking at it from more of a ecosystem and us sitting in the center of that.
I would just add the beauty of a centralized intermediary is that you can give a one-stop shop for the employer versus making them run around to 14 different school districts and 35 different charter networks. You have to do that. The other thing I just say is, we've done analysis that if every single person in Dallas County looking for a job got a job, had the skills for that job, we'd still have 75,000 unfilled jobs. And between the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act coming at us, we're going to be adding 50,000, 60,000 more jobs if we just get our pro rata share. And a lot of that incentives of the federal government and that legislation is to make sure you're directing those opportunities to historically marginalized communities. So if you can prove that you have a system that's going to do that, you're going to disproportionately benefit in that funding. And so those are the numbers you have to share with employers to basically say, you're not going to be able to take advantage of this huge opportunity if you're not set up for success.
I think that's where you're really positioned for some great opportunity, right? Because you see that, and I would offer a lot of the missed opportunities around the country with other states and other regions is that they really see the employers as not part of the team, almost a downstream byproduct of their process. And when you do that, you really are, you're really setting yourself up to not leverage the power. I mean, we're sitting here at the Dallas Regional Chamber for a reason, right? At the end of the day, jobs are going to be what drives success factors here, right? We want jobs, we want wealth creation, we want folks to have a better life, and those jobs are really important. How are employers connected to your mission? How are you bringing them in to ensure that they're part of this co-creation?
Sure, so several ways. Certainly investing in solving the problem. So working in strong collaboration with JPMorgan Chase and designing, the platform and leveraging their team of engineers and Force for Good to help co-create and co-design it was a big piece of that for us. But the other piece is that we wanted to make sure that the chambers didn't feel like this is something that they weren't a part of. So we couldn't do this work in isolation from the chambers. So it's getting that buy-in from the Fort Worth Chamber, the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber, and the Metropolitan Black Chamber, Arlington Chamber, all of them coming together and presenting this solution, this opportunity to use the power of data to take those industry insights and connect them with the students who are graduating with those certifications, degrees, and credentials and do that matching. And when they saw that, they said, no, that is not what we're doing. I mean, we don't do anything like that, and this is very valuable for us at the Chamber. I think the other piece is looking at them as strong partners in terms of what do you need from us? How can we best support economic development work for you as a chamber? And one of the things they said is, can you create a dashboard that shows this data so we know what the pipeline looks like and we can pull up whatever career cluster we decide, whether that's energy or agriculture, health sciences, and be able to show employers that are looking at, companies that are looking at Fort Worth, what does the pipeline truly look like? That's powerful for us. So I think it's the ability to co-create and co-design, solve the problem with the corporate partner and ask them what they need and not try to address it in isolation.
I would just say ditto to what she said, and then on top of that, really being intentional about understanding all the CTE pipelines and pathways within each of our school districts so that you can aggregate it and understand how many are actually going into the various fields versus what the labor market intelligence says that you should be producing. Because again, they've been historically operating in silos versus being collaborated across those institutions.
I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing this. Congratulations.